Why had he been made like that? Why was I made like this? Why has such a soul been given to me? He takes zero responsibility. Obviously, Lord Henry gave him a soul earlier. I think that's interesting. Um, During the 3 terrible hours of the play had lasted, he'd lived centuries of pain, eon upon eon of torture. His life was well worth hers. She had marred him for a moment if he had wounded her for an age. Besides, women were better suited to bear sorrow than men. They lived on their emotions. They only thought of their emotions. When they took lovers, it was merely to have someone with whom they could have scenes. Lord Henry had told him that, and Lord Henry knew what women were. Pause again. Lord Henry knows what women are. He's so horrible. Um, but here we hear Henry's views coming out of Dorian again. Why should he trouble about Sybil Vane? She was nothing to him now. But the picture. What was he to say of that? It held the secret of his life and told his story. It had taught him to love his own beauty. Would it teach him to loathe his own soul? Would he ever look at it again? What a great set of lines. Again, the separation of soul and physical body here. You know, it taught him to love his own beauty, to be narcissistic. Would the picture teach him to hate his own soul? Would it give him a conscience? This is a question. And the duality is very present here. Would he ever look at it again? No, it was merely an illusion wrought on the troubled senses. The horrible night that he had passed had left phantoms behind. Suddenly there had fallen upon his brain that tiny scarlet speck that makes men mad. The picture had not changed. It was folly to think so. Yet it was watching him, with its beautiful marred face and its cruel smile. Pause again. What was it that Dorian had said when he looked at the picture and he thought about the picture staying the same age and him getting older? He said something like, "It will mock me someday, mock me dreadfully," or something like that. I kind of feel like that's happening right now, except in a way that Dorian didn't expect. I mean, look at this line. It was watching him with its beautiful marred face and its cruel smile. It's kind of creepy. Its bright hair gleamed in the early sunlight. Its blue eyes met his own. A sense of infinite pity, not for himself, but for the painted image of himself came over him. I think that's interesting too. Dorian is not sad for himself. He's sad for the picture. It had altered already and would alter more. Its gold would wither into gray, its red and white roses would die. For every sin that he committed, a stain would fleck and wreck its fairness. Sounds like he's planning to commit more sins here. I think this is interesting because this is a artistic definition of morality, and I think it bears consideration here for a minute or two. Dorian is upset not that he has done something wrong, but that his soul is altering. He's not concerned about doing the right thing, but about his soul looking good. And, you know, maybe there's some connection here that Oscar Wilde's trying to say something about religion and the idea of heaven and hell and the idea of the human soul. Maybe people aren't doing the right thing because it's the right thing, and they're not feeling guilty because they did something wrong. Maybe they're being manipulated by an idea of heaven and hell that is external to themselves, much like the picture. Maybe, you know, people don't feel guilty. Some people don't feel guilty for doing bad things. They're just worried about the consequences of these bad things. For Dorian, the consequence is seeing his picture get worse. For these people maybe who don't necessarily have a conscience, the consequence is the idea of hell. Not real sorrow for the action itself, but sorrow for the consequence of the action. You know, we're getting into some philosophical stuff here, but I think that's definitely happening. Let's see. For every sin that he committed, a stain would fleck and wreck its fairness. But he would not sin. The picture, changed or unchanged, would be to him the visible emblem of conscience. He would resist temptation. I think that's interesting too. What would you give to have a visible representation of your soul? Like open up the closet and take a look at the mirror of your soul and know whether your day's actions have been good or bad. That's what the picture is to Dorian, or at least what it could be to Dorian at this point. Oh, obviously, I alluded to this earlier, but we've got an initiating event here. Like, if it wasn't him meeting Lord Henry and all this kind of stuff going on, this is definitely changing the trajectory of his life. He made that mad wish, but now we know that that mad wish had an effect somehow. Let's see. would be to him the visible emblem of conscience. He would resist temptation. He would not see Lord Henry anymore. Would not, at any rate, listen to those subtle, poisonous theories that in Basil Hallward's garden had first stirred with him the passion for impossible things. He would go back to Sybil Vane, make her amends, marry her, try to love her again. Yes, it was his duty to do so. She must have suffered more than he had, poor child. He had been selfish and cruel to her. The fascination that she had exercised over him would return. They would be happy together. His life would be beautiful and pure. Is this a try for a return to innocence? Beautiful and pure life, to go back to purity? He got up from his chair and drew a large screen right in front of the portrait, shuddering as he glanced at it. How horrible, he muttered to himself, and he walked across the window and opened it. When he stepped out into the grass, he drew a deep breath. The fresh morning air seemed to drive away all his somber passions. He thought only of Sybil. A faint echo of his love came back to him. He repeated her name over and over again. The birds that were singing in the dew-drenched garden seemed to be telling the flowers about her. And so at the end, he's walked into a garden to try and recapture the innocence, the goodness, the purity that he used to have, to try and return himself to a state that's fit to be with this innocent girl. And that's the end of the chapter. So the painting changes, and that's the big deal. Obviously he was really mean to Sybil too. So that's kind of a big deal. It's his first truly negative action, truly selfish action, where we can see the influence of Lord Henry having a big impact on him. Yeah, I'm just going to let that sit. I'll let you think about it. Consider what implications you're pulling out of this chapter, and then we'll go over the chapter a little bit thematically next time before we jump into Chapter 8. Chapter 8 and Chapter 9 are two of the most important chapters also. We've got this trio of really, really important chapters here as the story intensifies. So I'll leave it at that. Y'all have a good night.